Good evening, I am the Hooligan, and this is From the Ashes. So, what is From the Ashes? Well, we're a small group. We're trying to create a fostering and supportive and inclusive community where individuals don't have to feel so alone. Because let's be fair, the world's burning around us. We have a devoted and small team. Again, we're devoted to small civil resistance, whether that's refusing to shop at big chains like Amazon that support Donald Trump, or even stepping away from more fascist social media like Twitter, because, let's be fair, Elon Musk. Could even be something as small as just going to protests, or even wildflower vandalism. We envision a world where mutual aid and shared knowledge can empower people to overcome whatever challenges they face, to achieve their goals, and build a brighter, more inclusive, and more fair future for everyone. So, what is my mission? Well, I'm just a mouthpiece for far braver and smarter people behind the scenes. But I suppose my perspective as a non-US resident gives me a unique ability to look at how current US politics are affecting everything in UK, even in wider Europe. I hope through sharing my experiences, everyone out there feeling abandoned or disenfranchised can feel less alone. I've decided to call this particular episode Obvious Mistakes and Betrayals, because it seemed like a fitting title for the story I'm about to share. And trust me, the story is one hell of a slow burning disaster. Kind of thing where you watch it unfold in real time and think to yourself, surely at some point someone's going to put a stop to all this. Just madness. But they didn't. They doubled down. And here we are, living with the consequences. So let's rewind to 2016. Britain, this plucky little island, once had a global empire that were about 47% at world, just has questionable infrastructure now. But we decided to divorce ourselves from our closest trading partner and biggest local economic ally to the European Union. The decision at the time I had no great interest in, or personal stake in, for what felt like a really long time. Everywhere you were watching or listening, all anybody were talking about was Brexit, and it were getting on my nerves. You have to understand, at the time I were in my early 20s, and I wasn't even remotely political. Not like I am today. That wouldn't come until COVID, really. Back then, my political knowledge extended to things about as far as the government should probably not do stupid things. But even with that limited insight, something about Brexit just didn't sit right with me. I remember in the simple way you do when you're young and stupid thinking to myself, well, most of the doctors and nurses and carers come from Europe. Surely kicking everybody out from Europe's a bad idea. See, I assumed that people at the top knew what they were doing, because they were in charge. They're meant to be the ones with a clue. Turns out they didn't. Not even a fraction of a clue. And I was unaware at the time. Stupidity had been mainly spawned from the tiny brain of Nigel Farage. Again, it wouldn't be until later I found out that the man was just another bigot with a posh accent. I have to admit the plan was absolutely Machiavellian. It was devious and simple. A strategy so crude but yet effective, and it's been replicated time and time again, and it boils down to three simple steps. Convince ordinary people the thing that you're pushing isn't really against the best interests. In fact, it's a cure for everything. You point a finger at a group and blame them for everything. Back then, they were European migrants. These days, it's people of a different colour and the trans community, particularly trans women. But the third step of it all is, when somebody calls you out on it, tell them they're lying. But when people bring out receipts, call it fake news. And this formula has worked like a charm for them. Now, I like to think of myself a bit ahead of the curve, because I never for a second was convinced that the lies people told me about why they were voting for Brexit were true. In fact, to this day, I genuinely believe that people thought the day after the vote the government was going to round up all European migrants and march them off the cliffs of Dover. And I wish I were exaggerating, but one of the fitters where I worked at the time actually thought that, actually said it to me. Now you're wondering what a fitter is, but a fitter is basically a maintenance engineer that nobody respects. And I still wonder to this day what he's doing. I still wonder if he keeps opening his copy at Daily Mail, looking for news of mass executions of British citizens. Now I assume he's looking at pictures because, you can't read. So you're asking why we're talking about Brexit. Call me arrogant, but I still think it's the main reason we are here today. And everything we're seeing is a direct consequence of that vote. To quote Steve Bannon, they flooded the zone with shit. And since then, it's just been a long line of dominoes waiting to fall. And once they've realised that they can just keep lying, everything else has followed. Rise of populism, culture wars, shift away from reality-based politics and facts. The idea that you don't actually need a substantially good idea, you just need to keep throwing garbage into discourse until nobody knows what's real anymore. And when they call you out, just call it fake news. When they bring in experts, send in some think tank crony. And when it all goes bad, just blame somebody else. And this strategy might have found its first fertile ground in Britain with Brexit, but very shortly after it spread around the world. And now all we can hear is distant sound of jackboot and all the wrong side of history that brings. Now, as a side note, I wrote this a few days before that orange muppet and his vice gopher decided to attack Vladimir Zelensky in front of Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend and all the other pro-MAGA journalists they put there because they wanted more transparency and wanted to get rid of Associated Press. And this all came on the heels of America striking a really good deal for Russia when it came to Ukrainian war. It gave everything Russia wanted in terms of its land grab, and America wanted to take far more than the actual contribution warranted. In all seriousness, I do not know how it all didn't end up in a scrap, especially when Vance decided to start lecturing. Seriously, what a twatty little man. Again, I assume the statue thought they would intimidate Vladimir Zelensky, this man that's been fighting nearly the entire Russian army since 2014. I mean, it's just a level of deranged thinking that Trump regularly claimed Biden were guilty of, and it's truly pathetic. Luckily, though, it didn't seem like it quite went down like they thought it would. The rest of the world largely knows that Russia started war, despite all Kremlin propaganda that Donald Trump wants to keep spouting. And I'm not surprised by any of this, really. Like I said, with recent changes to press allowed into White House events, it was only a matter of time before they decided that actual journalism were too much of a threat to their carefully curated lies. So they got rid of all Associated Press and just replaced them with far-right manosphere bloggers and Trump sycophants, because who needs actual reporting when you've got a bunch of incels and grifters spinning conspiracy theories? Or, heaven forbid, little Timmy from Daily Arse Kisser asking Donald Trump how he's so amazing, or how does he get that costume shop wig look. They don't want journalism, they just want propaganda. And that's what they're making sure the public gets, is propaganda. They thought it was deliciously ironic that Donald Trump's press secretary mentioned that they wanted more transparency. And without a doubt, we can see exactly through what they're doing. And that, right now, is currently the world we're living in. Now, let's bring this full circle, because make no mistakes, this all ties back to Brexit. Brexit was the first major test case of this idea that they've got about just lying the weight at top. And it works. It wasn't about facts and figures and a reasoned debate. It was about fear and anger and weaponising frustrations of poor people who struggled under an austerity government that just didn't care about them. And mainly it's just a group of people that don't like the fact that the world's changing around them. Instead of offering real solutions, though, they just keep finding a scapegoat and keep trying to sell everybody a fantasy. And it's working. The floodgates have opened, and what followed is a global shift in politics, where truth stopped mattering, and where people, the least qualified to run government, suddenly found themselves with all the power. So it's the same tactics that sold Brexit. They've sold Donald Trump to America, because they've sold culture wars and authoritarian dressed up as taking back control. And now in 2025, we're still living with the fallout of it. The economy in Britain is struggling because of Brexit. The NHS and all public services in Britain are on their knees because of constant austerity cuts, and because we divorced ourselves from his biggest trading partner. And what did we get? The promise of sunlit uplands. But all Brexit turned out to be were as real as the Mexico will pay for the war nonsense. And instead of accountability, what do we get? More deflection, more manufactured outrage, and more enemies to point at. Because the people who built this machine, Nigel Farage, Boris Johnson, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, all them little cronies, figured out the ultimate trick. If you just keep people angry enough, they won't ask questions. They won't ask who actually screwed them over in the first place. And that's why Brexit still matters. Because it wasn't a vote. It was just the first domino to fall. And now we're going to watch them all fall. So, look around. The tactics are still the same. But now they've refined them. The lies are bigger. The distractions are just going to get wider. The scapegoats are going to shift, and soon it won't be trans people anymore and brown people. Soon it'll be you. And you only have to look through history to see that. When Brexit was being pushed, it was about immigrants taking jobs and stealing healthcare, diluting culture. Now it's just about trans people invading bathrooms and books corrupting children and vaccines being microchipped to track you. Wherever there's a monster under bed waiting for you, they need to keep you from realising the people that have told you to be angry are the ones that you should actually be angry at. And it's working. They don't want you looking at a crumbling economy. They don't want you asking why your wages haven't gone up with inflation, or why your government can't seem to fix basic problems that have simple solutions. They'd rather be screaming at drag queens and not questioning billionaires why they've doubled the wealth during a cost of living crisis. They'd rather do Nazi thing and start burning books instead of you asking why people are profiting off your misery. Brexit were all about sovereignty, but these are the same people that want to sell Ukraine's sovereignty to Russia. It's not about taking back control. It's about selling people a dream that they can never deliver. We'll never turn around and ask what the real problems are. Because real problems are like underfunded schools and broken healthcare. That's mainly a British thing. I know America's got its own healthcare problems, or insurance-based healthcare problems. They're never actually going to get fixed. So, in America and in Britain and across Europe, across the whole world, the same formula, the same tricks. It's just a different face selling them to you. So, if you want to know why I'm still talking about Brexit all these years later, I think it's important because it was a moment when their mask finally slipped. Or now is the time the mask finally slipped. Because Brexit was just bullshit. Absolute bullshit. And they can carry on just lying outrageously and blatantly without any consequences because it's all about controlling narrative for them. They don't actually want to govern. And that's why we are where we are now. We're still drowning in the bullshit, wondering when people are going to wake the hell up to all this mess that we're in. When they're going to start pointing fingers and wondering why these divisive politics are still in play. Answer is because they work. So like I said, we are from the ashes, and me and the team came together initially to build a place where people could just gather resources and help, mainly Americans, who were feeling left out in the cold by this new administration, whether that be resources for women who need healthcare, transgender people needing support, or just finding news in rage bait or doom and gloom, just finding little ways to resist to it all. But the pace of change has caught us off guard. This administration is far more dangerous than we expected, especially with Elon Musk and his total lack of any kind of being reined in. So we're looking for people to help us gather those resources. As for me, I'm watching all this madness unfold from outside of the US. So I suppose part of my mission is also to try and keep people interested and informed on how the decision of a few rich people in America is changing the balance of power across the world and the consequences of that. So anyway, if you think you can help, or you just want a place to take a breather from all the noise, we have a link to the From the Ashes Discord server in the description below, and we hope to see you there soon. As for this podcast, if you liked it, please consider liking and subscribing.